So we thought about how can we make these, excess inventory sellable again and really like make them stylish for the pandemic times. So we took their pants and turned them into shorts. We took their blazers and turned them into something less constructed. And we did that with their like 5 bestseller pieces. So that's kind of speaks to, like the level of customization we'll go to really like work with the retailers. But the very beginning, go-to-market phase with the retailers will probably be more about like, hey, let's pick one of these 3 so we can really deliver the quality first. And then we can grow into a much bigger brand partnerships afterwards.
Hello and welcome to the eCommerce podcast. We believe that there is more than enough content focused on e-commerce marketing and not enough content celebrating the real heroes of e-commerce, those running the operation. Each week, we find and interview an e-commerce operations expert to share the secrets behind how some of this industry's most exciting businesses are run. I'm your host, Norbert Strappler, the CEO of SyncSpider. Hello and welcome to another eCommerce podcast interview. I am happy to meet Allison Lee today. Hi, Allison.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Great to have you here. Thanks for joining. Allison, you have a really great service. It's called Hemster. Tell us a bit more about that and about yourself.
Yeah, well, so I started Hemster about 6 years ago now, but basically what Hemster does is we're a tech-enabled tailoring service plugged into a B2B2C model, meaning that, we work with brands like Verity, LaFleur, A Day, and we basically allow them to offer virtual and in-store alterations to their shoppers to help them sell more and return less. And we also save those measurements for individual customers so they can reuse the data set for anything that's in their closet right now.
Oh wow, that's really a nice service for clothing stores. How did you get into that? How did you get into e-commerce?
Yeah, so my background is always in like the tech product and like data science. We didn't necessarily like think about like eCom as my biggest passion, but I think I'm really interested in like the consumer behavior and how to think about getting the data fully ingested from that, especially around like the fit and sizes. So, when you think about, something not fitting you, I think it's more of an acute pain point when you're buying something online, just because you're relying on these like obscure measurements on the size charts to kind of like guesstimate your closest size. So, we thought that like that pain point would be big enough for us to really go into the market.
Okay. And I've seen you have a platform specific API that integrates with other services. How does this work? How can I make use of something like this, or how would the service at all work for me as if I'm a store owner?
Yeah, so, we basically looked at like the brands and retailers, and, a lot of them are on either Shopify or Magento, and they have a very specific templates of their front end and back end from like the order management system. So yeah, we basically built a Shopify app that gets installed into your current order management system to be able to show tailoring options to your shoppers as they're picking a size. And also it adds our fit kit into your packages from like a 3PL perspective. So it's both like a front end and the back end, but it's really done through like the app itself. So, the installment only takes about 20 minutes from the retailers and like the brand side.
Oh, wow. So very easy and fast to implement.
Yeah.
And you're offering a free tailoring from your favorite brands. So how does this work? Do you call customers? Do they type in some measurements and you calculate everything, or how does it work for
so we basically put in this like one sheet of paper that has the ruler stickers printed on them, and then that's the one the customers will use either to fit themselves if it's like a really easy like denim fit, or if it's something more complicated, they can meet with our virtual fitters, and our fitters will basically guide them through how to mark their garments for their perfect fit.
Okay. So when someone sets up their profile on Hemster, they are asked to answer some questions, as I understood. And what kind of research went into the development? How did you create the content of this survey?
Yeah, so we basically want to be able to answer some of like our fit preference questions that we would ask in during our fittings. So we basically have done about 5,000 fittings at this point, and I think from there we can basically distill it down to 10 like very important questions about how do you like to wear this specific garment, because you and I could have like exact same body measurements, but what if you like to wear things loose and I like to wear things tight? So that's kind of like the preferential data that we're trying to get at through the surveys and through the interaction with our fitters.
Yeah, I can assume that there are maybe many people that are uncertain about the virtual aspect of a tailoring service. What do you tell them?
Yeah, well, it's two things. I think you already know what fits you really well. So all we're doing is kind of like asking very standardized questions from our side for you to answer those for us to accurately measure and tailor them virtually. So our accuracy rate is about 99.4%, which means only 0.6% of our orders get complained on. So I think that's way higher accuracy rate than even in-person tailoring. So I think, data really powers and, delivers our accuracy and quality from afar.
And what I have seen on your website, I'm currently looking at the website because you have very famous brands on the website, like Reformation or A-Day. What was the process like getting them on board? How did you win them?
Yeah, I think, when you think about like brand partnerships, you want to understand what is their pain points that you're trying to solve through your technology too. So, for us, we knew that, we could increase like the fitting room conversions in the stores if they just had offered very basic alterations for free.
Yeah.
And we have that case study from so many different brands who's basically used us from the day one. And then for the eCom side, like we know that like the return rate is such a huge problem in all of online retailers. So we really thought about how can we lower that, returns by offering, again, basic alterations as a viable option above returns. So, when you understand, I think there are retailers' pain points and you can kind of answer to those with your technology, like the conversation becomes a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely understand that. What are the typical return rates at the moment for clothing?
Yeah, so for e-commerce, I mean, we hear a pretty broad spectrum, especially when we're consulting with the retailers. Like the lowest we've heard was probably like 15% from an e-com.
That's really, really low.
But we've heard as like high as like 68% of a return rate. So I think it really just depends. Like if your merchandise mix is kind of closer to something that talks about fit a little bit less, like like streetwear and like the joggers, I think they tend to have like a little bit lower return rate. But if you are trying to sell something more constructed, like anything around like the blazers or even premium denim, like their return rate can be quite high.
Yeah, I understand absolutely, because also I think the price is relevant in that case. So if you have something that is more expensive, you're most likely not happy when it's not a perfect fit, I think.
Right, exactly. And also I think that's part of the retailers why they choose to work with us, is because they want to really drive like the full price sales. And when you're committing to like a full price purchase, I think from the consumers, they they want to be really confident in choosing the right fit and size, and like seeing that, oh, actually tailoring is included for this $400 dress that I really want to buy for my wedding or whatever it may be. That basically lifts their conversion from the get-go. And of course, everything that we touch from Hemster's side becomes the final sale for the brand. So that is also just like an added bonus for them.
Absolutely. It's a great idea. Coming back to the brands again, what I'm wondering, what is important when you partner with different brands? Is there any blueprint that you follow on how to partner with them? Do you have specific contracts to fill out, or is it? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, we probably have like 3 separate like product suites that we try to start our retailers on. So it really depends on their own KPI. So they say they're really focusing on their store services right now, that we would start them off with our retail core service. Or if they're like, hey, I really want to figure out this conversion thing on our eCom site, then we would get them started with like implementing Hemster banner on their PDPs. And if they're really worried about their return rate, then we would start with the return interceptor, which is basically offering tailoring as like a viable option to choose above returns. So those are like our 3 major like pushes with the retailers. And of course, like with time, we will try to customize our growth plan with the retailers as much as possible. So they may start with one of the 3, but a lot of our retailers end up expanding their services into multiple of our offerings and or like create their own. So the brands like a day we just launched this really amazing collection with them called Made Again. And that's not necessarily we would pitch to the first time retailers, but what we have done is, after we have implemented our eCom return interceptor services, we noticed that, they had a lot of leftover inventory impacted by COVID. So we thought about how can we make these, excess inventory sellable again and really like make them stylish for the pandemic times. So we took their pants and turned them into shorts. We took their blazers and turned them into something less constructed. And we did that with their like 5 bestseller pieces. So that's kind of speaks to, like the level of customization we'll go to really like work with the retailers. But the very beginning, go-to-market phase with the retailers will probably be more about like, hey, let's pick one of these 3 so we can really deliver the quality first. And then we can grow into a much bigger brand partnerships afterwards.
Got it. Well, great strategy. Absolutely. I've seen that you launched your first startup while you've been in college at Berkeley. What did you learn from that experience?
I mean,
first startup,
I mean, my very first startup, I think it's almost an overstatement to call it a startup. Let's just call it a really like nice pet project that, some of us were working on. I mean, I really loved the experience, right? It allowed me to be really like creative about my way of thinking about product and technology and how do I apply that into day-to-day lives. And I hadn't really done that, or I didn't really have that kind of exposure to technology in the previous years. So I think that did open up my eyes to think about, oh my gosh, this is really fun. Like, can I actually do this, after I graduate? And it's really funny because 4 of us who worked on those projects, we all went on to become founders in some shape or form. I think 2 of them actually started a company together and they just became a unicorn. And then I'm doing this. And then the 4th person was also starting a company last time I talked to him. So I think, just like the early exposure to thinking that this could be a possibility for me is really powerful. And I'm really appreciative that, I had friends like that in college who were willing to start something kind of dumb, but, failed together and just like have a really great time in that journey.
Yeah. Have a great time is always, I think, the most important thing when you go through just such an experience together. And did you learn something from there? Did it help you with your company now?
I mean, I think a lot of it was more qualitative. I think a lot of the learnings I had in between the first startup and then, the fact that I went to work for a lot of like much bigger startups as my first, career choice. And then finally going back to Hemster and really starting from like ground zero, that's really shown me a lot of different stages of a company. So, obviously like we tried to start something from zero and it was really hard. And then I went to go see something where they were about to IPO. And that felt like a really, really well-oiled machine. And I understood like the chaos that came with that scale. And then I went back to like about Series C company. And that's where I really found my sweet spot of like, okay, this is what it's early stage enough, but I really understood like what the growth could look like for, that unrealized potential. So that's what got me really excited. And then that's where I learned probably the most tactical skills on actually how to grow and scale your B2B2C model. So yeah, and then that probably took all together from my very first one to, when I decided to go for it, it was maybe like a 7-year journey. And then afterwards I was like, okay, I think I know enough to fail again, but at least this time I think I have a better chance. And I didn't really start this to make it big or anything. This was again my like pet project. I was really passionate about like the idea of the perfect fit. And I thought that I could really bring the accuracy that the fit profiles deserve. So, that's what the idea consumes you first. And then it's been 5 years since then too. So hopefully, I can continue on this journey and really continue to grow the company as well.
Yeah, cool. Are there any big mistakes that you see typically from online retailers?
I think I don't want to call them mistakes because, I think they are really trying to do their best at bringing the best possible merchandise to their shoppers. And I think there is a lot happening around, especially through like pandemic times, like so much has like changed. And I think the biggest thing I've seen is how much do you embrace change, and how much are you willing to try something new and follow up with it in a methodical way where like the pilot turns into like a full blown like new initiative. And I think when you are really busy doing your core functionalities as a retailer, those new like R&D or like new initiatives tend to not happen. And I think that's where you could potentially miss out on the innovation side and like what's next in retail, and always keeping their eyes and ears open on the new opportunities that way.
Yeah. And is there any specific thing that you would recommend for as a quick win to online retailers? What could they do to improve the growth or to make something better for their customer experience?
Yeah. So I think kind of making sure you have enough data on the customers so you can track their journey is important. Very often we talk to, our potential partners and we ask them like, do you know, why people are not buying? Or do you know why people are returning? Because, if you knew that, 30% of people were returning because of the fit issues, then I know I can address that. But I think a lot of the times they're like, actually, I'm not sure. And that's where it becomes even hard for me as a vendor to really help them think about the creative solutions to help them fix these customer issues too. So I think there's a lot of, specialized tools like Zendesk to really help with your customer experience. Is that tied back to your CRM and is that tied back to your, overall marketing strategies? That's where I see a little bit of disconnect, especially for surprisingly, especially if it's like a smaller company where like one person is trying to do it all and you just don't have time to, connect the dots sometimes. So I think definitely the biggest thing is knowing what the customers are excited and frustrated about in their shopping experience with your platform. And once you know that, like fixing it is a much easier part. But I often find that they don't necessarily know the full root cause, or they're talking about 3 separate problems, but they would boil down into one main core problem. So just doing that exercise of like, what actually is the big problem here, and really setting up some milestones to fix that will bring a lot of clarity into business.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you very much. That's really cool. What role does automation play in your operations?
Alteration, how we think about it is it's means to an end. Like our data science is like what really fuels our growth. Our warehouse basically breaks down the traditional tailoring into 6 different stations, and surprisingly, tailoring is only one of those stations. Rest of the stations are obviously inbound, outbound, quality control, but 2 of the 6 stations are dedicated to making sure our data is right. So, I think that kind of speaks to how we think about like the tailoring as a tool, which is really important to us. But at the end of the day, like the technology and the data is where we are really leaning heavily towards to fulfill our orders, but also grow forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what will you be focused on the rest of this year? It's really short Christmas season coming.
I know the holidays are, right around the corner. So right now we are, working with a lot of our brands on like their holiday marketing and like making sure we have enough capacity to like, cover for that, growth for holiday rush. We're already seeing a ton of like fall growth happening from our brand partners, which is really exciting. So we really think it's going to be a big Q4 for the retailers, especially in fashion and apparel. So we're just bracing ourselves for that growth. And then next year, we're launching some like really amazing initiatives. But Q4 is all going to be, can we make sure, we can keep up with the growth right now?
Yeah, I think that this year again, online still is booming, boosting. Since many, many years, it's growing, and Corona made another really big boost. I think we won years in digitalization with that. So even if it's, of course, the baddest thing that could happen to have a pandemic for digitalization, it was a huge boost, I think. And
totally.
It's going a lot online. Yeah. Last question for the day. Eileen, who has told you the most about e-commerce in your career?
We lean heavily on our advisors. So one of our advisors, he has a very extensive knowledge, not just in like the business side of e-commerce, but he's done so many different types of implementations from like the digital transformation side. His name is Scott Locks. He was the head of digital at so many different brands like Allison Lee, Intermix. I think he was at Vince for a second as well. So he fully understands like, back and forth of like what the eCom integration could look like for vendors like me, but also for the brands themselves. So awesome. I would say he's been the most helpful when it comes to like us understanding like all the nooks and crannies of how to make sure we can really fit into this ecosystem. Okay, got it.
Thank you so much, Allison. It was really a pleasure talking to you. And what I heard today, we heard it so often already. And I think it's really so important for every e-commerce store owner. Have your data, know your customer. Yeah, know what they like, know what they dislike. And these are the basics to improve. Thank you very much. Good luck with Hemster, and have a great rest of the year with a huge boost.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
And that's it for this episode of the eCom Ops podcast. If you enjoyed listening and would like us to find and interview more e-commerce operations experts, please search for eCom Ops podcast in your favorite podcast listening app, and then subscribe, rate, and review. Until next time.